All right, guys, in today's video, we're going to do LAN devices today with Tailscale. Okay. Now, this one is specifically dedicated to GL.iNet routers. Now, look, I see, as far as the name, GL.iNet, so we're going to call it GL.iNet. All right. I only just started recently messing with this brand. I really like them. They're pretty awesome, right? They have a nice, front interface on top of OpenWrt, which you guys know I use for like my routers or try to use whenever I can. So what are we doing? So we are going to have our LAN devices communicate with our Tailscale network. Okay. Now, this is actually a lot more involved than you would think, because the way GL.iNet does it, okay, GL.iNet has Tailscale and like a user space thing, which I'll talk a tiny bit more about when I get to that part. But basically, it's not as easy as you would think regarding having a two-way communication. It's easy for you to have a one-way communication. You can have your Tailscale devices communicate with your LAN devices, but not the other way around, and we'll get into that. So first, we're going to actually go into our demonstrator here today, which is going to be our Crush FTP application. So actually, let me go into our diagram here. Okay, so I have a camera system. Okay. And it's right now is connected to a router, right? That's on the Tailscale network, right? And I even put the model here specifically. Okay. And over here, this is like my actual, the router I have here at home. Okay. My Unraid server, and then the Docker container, which in this case would be a Tailscale container that allows you to make a connection between your Tailscale network. And we're going to jump over here to the router, and we're going to make the necessary changes so that the application, right? So first and foremost, we can communicate with our camera system, but most importantly, our camera system is able to then actually communicate with our Tailscale network devices, specifically our container, because we want our camera system to start uploading FTP, using FTP to, drop videos off onto our Docker container. So that's what we're going to be using as our demonstration today. All right. So now let's go ahead and let's get back to it. So first and foremost, in case you don't know, right, the number one way, right, that you're going to connect these two together is you're just going to simply change the network from bridge to container, and then you're going to select the Tailscale. Okay, so that's just as easy as me going in here, hitting edit, and then I just simply change this custom, because I was given a custom IP address, which, I have a different video for that if you want to figure out how to give your Docker containers their own IP addresses. But change the container, and then we select the Tailscale. Okay, and then we're going to hit apply. All right, so I just added the Tailscale container onto, our Docker application onto our Tailscale thing, which, as a quick recap, the way I did that is, you go in and you just change the host network from bridge or whatever you're using to container, and then you just select the Tailscale container. Like I said, I have a video on that. It's real easy. It's no work at all, right? And then all we do is we just made sure that the ports in our Tailscale container is actually listening to the ports that we know are used in our Docker application, which it is, right? Which I'll show that, right? Which you could just run netstat -tulpn, the flags, and then doom, right? And then I can see, in addition to the Tailscale's like ports that it listens to, right? I can see the ports that I know our application listens to, right? Which is 20, which I can see 21, which is the FTP port. Okay. So boom. So we know now that our Tailscale, so this is already good. Let's move on over to the GL.iNet router, because this is going to be now the part that you're going to need to figure out. Okay. So first and foremost, right, like I say, GL.iNet, when you go in, and they have their nice little UI that's over the OpenWrt stuff. So you're going to, go in, you're going to click on applications, right? And then you're going to click on Tailscale, enable it. And then, you go through the simple stuff of connecting it to your Tailscale account, right? and then once it's connected, you're going to enable allow remote access to LAN. And what this does, as you know, you can see right here, right? What that one setting does is it allows your devices on your Tailscale network to communicate with any device on the LAN, on the LAN side of this router. Okay, which if I go back to my diagram, you see here, right, we have our camera system. But like I said, this is only one way, right? This is only one way. In fact, I'll even show this right here, right, which is the thing, right? So Tailscale, right, is on that GL.iNet router. We do remote access to LAN. This is one way to our devices connected to that router on the LAN. Okay, we need to do a NAT rule. Okay, so now the way you're going to do that is you're going to on the GL.iNet routers, right? You go to system, you go to advanced settings, right? And then you can click on the link, which will take you to the actual OpenWrt side of the router, right? Which then, you give it the same credentials that you use getting in here. Okay. And then, you'll be familiar, you'll be used to the same interface, right? For those of you that use OpenWrt, right? You're going to go to network. What is it? It's firewall, right? So network, firewall, right? And then you're gonna click on NAT rules. Okay. And then this is where the bread and butter happens. Okay. So now for my people using the like I said, the GL.iNet routers, okay, because this is going to be different from people that's using regular OpenWrt routers that install Tailscale themselves. Okay. GL.iNet, from the best of my understanding, from the limited research I did, okay, is they have Tailscale operating in something, it's like some user space thing. So like you won't see a firewall rule or a firewall zone for Tailscale. You won't see a network interface for Tailscale. I do believe you will see a network device for Tailscale, I think. But it's like hidden. It's really weird, like how it shows up in GL.iNet, like how they integrate it into the thing, which I mean, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not, I don't know. But for those of you that's using the regular OpenWrt, like you guys are going to have to wait until I get another video out on that. Cause I'd have to like mess around with my other OpenWrt routers, my regular OpenWrt routers, to actually like fully understand how to do what we're about to do here, which is technically, I mean, you use OpenWrt, you probably already know how to do it, so it's easy. This one I would actually probably say is a little bit more complicated. So for here, right, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add a NAT rule, right, which in the case here, you're going to see that I already did it. Okay. But when you click add and, you're going to give it a name, TCP. Now this is where it's going to be a little complicated. Okay. So, like I said, because it's in the user space thing, it works with none of these. You can't select any one of these and it would work. So you have to select any zone, right? So the outbound zone is going to be where, best I can explain, is like where the packet is going to be destined to go to, which zone, right? If it's trying to go to the internet, it will go to the WAN zone, right? If it's trying to go to a device on the LAN, right? Obviously the LAN zone, you got your guest zone, right? But you have to select any zone. It does not work in anything else, okay? Now, source address, right? Now, the source address, you want it to be the device IP address that you're trying to have access your LAN devices, okay? Now, obviously, because I edited it, so I just showed the device IP, because right now, like, I only have one specific, because this is a remote router, all right? I have only one specific device connected to this this router. That's why I did device IP, but all you would do is you would just use the subnet for your entire LAN thing. Okay. So what would that look? I'll just use this. I'll just use this port thing as a demonstration, right? So, most people just, 192, 168, everybody's used to like, the 101, right? Which is the IP address of like, a typical router. Okay. Right. And then like you might have devices that have 168.1.10 or 19, right? Or 113. Okay, what you would do is in the source address, you're just going to simply do the subnet, which is going to be 192.168.1. Of course, if you're using the 10 dot whatever's or the I think it's like 177, I forgot the other ones, but any of those, and you're just going to do 0. You're going to do 0, and then what you need to do is you need to do a slash, and then you need to give it the oh gosh, I'm sorry guys, I'm drawing a blank on what it's called, but you know what it is. It's the thing that determines like how many hosts, or how the range of IP addresses within the subnet that you're going to like include, which typically you're looking at like, I guess like 24 or 31 or something, right? But you're going to do this, right? You do this, and then this right here would tell the NAT rule that the source address can be from any IP address within this, the 68.1 subnet. Okay, so that's how you would cover all your LAN devices. Like I said, in my particular case, I have a specific device alone I want to do, so that's why I'm gonna do that, right? So I'm going to end that right there, right? If you want to limit it to like specific ports and stuff, I mean, you can do that. I didn't. But then the destination address, right? So now destination address is actually a perfect example of what I was just talking about, okay? So the destination address is the specific IP address, right, that you want this NAT rule to apply to for any packets going to this particular IP address. And as you can see here, I did 164.0.0/10. This should include, to the best of my understanding, the entire range of IP addresses that Tailscale assigns on their network. Okay, so like you might have a device that's 100.81, 100.72, right, and then blah blah blah. So you do if you do .64.0.0/10, that should include all of them, to the best of my knowledge, right? Maybe I might be off by a tiny bit. I don't believe so as far as what I looked up. So this should work. Okay, now this is where it gets all nice. As for the actions go, you are going to select Masquerade. And what Masquerade does, which I have a video on, I actually do have a video on the masquerading thing in case you want to actually learn a little bit more about it, because I thought it was cool when I figured out how it works, right? Masquerading is just simply like the IP address, or like the information, the source information of that packet gets changed to whatever interface, whatever interface was used to send the packet out. So that way, when it sends it out, the receiver has the correct information to send it back. This is common for internet access, right? Because how does Google know that of the 3 laptops that you have on your network, right, that 168.1.7 is the correct one to is the correct one to go to, when there's probably like a billion laptops, right, that have a router that gave it the same exact IP address, right? That's what masquerading does, right? It handles all that. As I said, I have a video that goes into that to the best of my understanding, okay? But this is how you set it up, okay? This is all I use. You hit save, and then that's it, all right? And then as a bonus, one quick thing I do want to mention, okay, is that to kind of make it easy for myself, especially since like sometimes like my containers might I might delete them and re-add them, which re-add them to the Tailscale network, which then gives them a different IP address. What I try to do is I try to limit how many places I need to change the IP address. So instead of having a bunch of applications trying to go to the same Tailscale IP address, I just try to have them go to a host name is associated with that IP address, right? And that's what you would do here for OpenWrt. Like I said, this is optional. You don't have to do this. You can stick with the IP addresses, you crazy people. But you get here network DHCP, the DHCP option here, and then you just go to host names. And if you notice, right, because the only bad thing I could just say by GL.iNet, which I understand, but then again, I don't know, I just feel some type of way. It's just that they are like generations behind on the OpenWrt version, on the OpenWrt version that they run. Okay, OpenWrt is actually on the release candidate for 25 right now. Where you see here, we're on 21 or 22, one of those. But anyway, you know, so go here, you can give it an actual host name. I try to stick it with the same one I have in Tailscale, and then you just add the Tailscale IP address, right, that is obviously assigned to it, and then boom, we're done. Okay, so that's it. So once you have that, once you have your NAT rule, right, and then, you know, if this is what you want, then we can actually go ahead, we can go into our camera. Okay, so now if you look here, you will see that I am in my camera system. It's a Reolink, right? I'm in the FTP, right? I selected the port. I selected the host name, right? I selected the host name, which, like I say, it wouldn't know that this is on the Tailscale, that this is the Tailscale device, because obviously GL.iNet, just because GL.iNet is connected to Tailscale doesn't mean it shares the host names with you know, with the rest of the LAN devices, right? So that you have to like do yourself manually, which is why we did this. Okay. But, you know, we did that, right? I, you know, filled my information, how I like the, you know, how I'm doing it with this in this particular case. And now I'm going to hit test, and we're going to see if it's successful. And actually, interestingly enough, oh, you see, there you go. See, it succeeded. Because it actually failed initially, and that was actually because the IP address did change, because in creating these videos, I had deleted it. And so see, that's a perfect example of what I mean, right? So instead of me having to change it in a bunch of places, I just changed it where I had it, and that was that, right? But as you saw, I had hit test and it succeeded. So we know that the connection is good. And there you go. That's it. You have now made it so that, let me go back to my diagram here, right? You have now made it so that for your GL.iNet router, okay, your GL.iNet router is allowing your LAN devices to establish a full connection to your devices on the Tailscale network. And you know, and how we did that is we just simply, you know, we went into the, you know, the GL.iNet router, right? You know, you establish a Tailscale connection, you know, get it added, make sure you allow that access to the LAN devices. Then we went and we changed the, you know, added a NAT rule for that subnet. And then in my particular case, right, I only did it for like my one little system here. We added it for that subnet. And then, you know, and make sure that we included all of the, or to, you know, the best of my knowledge, the entire Tailscale network range of IP addresses. And then boom, right? We did the test, and we saw that now our Reolink, our device is able to initiate a connection to our Docker container, right? Which, like I said, right, the default setting thing, right, where you enable the LAN access is only one way. So this normally wouldn't have been able to establish a connection to the container. Only the container would be able to establish connection to that, which doesn't work for FTP, right, for obvious reasons. But yeah, there we go. That concludes this video. I hope this helped you guys, and you take care.